All right, let's turn to the Camnay story, which is really one of the most famous and important episodes in really broadcast journalism history. And I think we should probably spend a good part of our next remaining time on this segment talking about that. Could you talk a little bit about that story, how you came to cover the story, what the story was for generations who were not familiar with it?
I came to cover the story the way I'd have come to cover any military operation. Um, we maintained a one-room bureau in Da Nang. We had a bureau in Saigon, and we had this press camp in Da Nang. The press camp in Da Nang was a kind of, I guess the most accurate description would be motel, old, rundown motel, that had been a brothel, actually, run by a Frenchman, owned by a Frenchman. When the Marines moved into I Corps, the first Corps of Vietnam, with Da Nang as its main city, it set up the press camp. It took over this motel as a press camp. And each of the bureaus paid rent. We rented our little room. And I think visiting correspondents would come through and they would just pay an overnight rent or a hotel room. And so trying to cover this war with limited resources, obviously I felt as the bureau chief that the place that we got to have somebody in Da Nang all the time, and we did a kind of rotation. And it was my shift up there, and I went out with. I guess I got up there in the morning, and then went out in the afternoon with Hatu Khan. We had a Jeep, CBS Jeep.
And he was your cameraman?
He was a CBS camera, one of the CBS cameramen. At that point, we had a few cameramen.
Right, and he was Vietnamese?
Vietnamese, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting man, was there during the French War and the French administration. Interesting, elegant, speaks a couple of languages, became a good friend. In any case, Khan and I went out just checking in with various of the Marine command posts in the Da Nang area about what was going on in terms of operations. And one of the units we went to, and you have to forgive me, I can't give you unit designations here because it's just all gone. I mean, if I went back to notes, I could. But we went out to the various Marine command posts to find out what units might be doing the next day. And one of them I went to said, we've got an operation going out tomorrow morning. It's an amphibious operation. Amphibious in the sense that it was through rice paddies, so that they had these vehicles that could carry troops through fairly high water, not deep water, but high water. And I said, fine, well, what time are you leaving? They said, we're leaving about 5, before dawn. And so, fine, we went absolutely with no sense that this was going to be any different from any, as we used to say, walk in the sun, where nothing might happen or something might happen. It was a search and destroy mission, which is how many of those missions were designated. And we got there, went off in one of these vehicles, and as I guess we must have gone for maybe 45 minutes or so through before we stopped and the ramps came down and everybody got out. And I was talking to a young captain, and I said, where are we going? What are we doing? He said, a place called Cam Nay. We're going to punish this village. I had never heard that word before in that context. I mean, I'd never heard it even in Algeria. An officer said, we're going to, using that, it just rang wrong to me. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, we've been taking fire, and so we're going to punish it. We got out. There was we had, a barrage had been laid down before we arrived. You could see it, hear it, mainly rocket fire, outgoing rocket fire. We got out. The troop that we were with, they approached in a line towards the village with some troops behind. I was walking on the line, and you could hear the odd pop going of rifle fire. A Marine to my right went down, wounded. Everybody then opened up like mad. It was interesting. He was wounded. He was shot in the ass. He was shot in the backside. He was okay. It was a bad wound, but he was okay. But it had clearly come from behind. 80% chance that was friendly fire. Then everybody just opened up. There seemed to be almost no return fire. I can't say there wasn't any because it's very, very confusing. But as we approached the hamlets, Camnay was not a village. Camnay was a string of collection of hamlets, so that on the military map, you would see these little clumps, and there was Camnay 1, Camnay 2, Camnay 3, Camnay 4. They're strung out. It's it's as if these little disconnected neighborhoods each had a number to them. As we came in to this particular Camnay, and you can see the other Camnays there, guys started lighting up with matches, with lighters, with flamethrowers, lighting up the roofs of the houses. And to my right and to my left, I could see smoke rising from these other Camnays. I had been on search and destroy operations where they've gone in, they've searched houses, or they've found bunkers, they've found residue of military occupation, and they bulldozed down those protective structures or burned them. It happened. And they would find a cache of either of guns, of ammunition, and of rice bags that were clearly there to resupply Viet Cong or North Vietnamese troops. This was just a hamlet. There was no evidence of anything. Nobody found anything in there. But they were just clearing people out as they found them. The place was empty of anyone young, mainly old men, women, and children. And they were clearing these people out and torching their houses. It smelled very wrong. This was not like any operation I had ever been on before with American troops, or with any troops anywhere, quite honestly. At one point, the Marines, in 2 or 3 different positions, had their rifles, guys were taking cover, held their rifles pointed at a rather large, comparatively large, hooch, as they called it, cottage.
Mm-hmm.
A lieutenant was calling up a flamethrower. The guy, flamethrower, right down, was about to light up. Hatukan got out in front and said, no, hold on. And you could hear voices coming out of this. So Con and I, and then the lieutenant, come up to the door of this place, which is empty. You can see some cooking pots and stuff and remains of a fire. And Con's down on his knees, and he's whispering very calmly and gently into the place. Up comes a stone, revealing a hole, a shelter down there, and a family with babies and young women and a couple of old men come out. And they're, of course, terrified. And Con coaxes them out, talks them out. This lieutenant doesn't know what to do. He feels terrible about us on the one hand, relieved on the other. I mean, the guy is not a killer, but embarrassed about what might have been. There was just this atmosphere that the Marines were going in there with no real strategic point, but to eliminate this place. Not with all inhabitants, as I said. They were carefully moving people out and people were wailing because they were not only losing their houses, they were losing their rights too, which we lit up.
And this was all being captured, or
Yeah.
much of it was being captured.
Well, whatever we could capture, and there was certainly no one trying to stop us from capturing it either, by the way. I mean, there was nobody saying you better not shoot this or anything like that. None.
Did that surprise you at the time?
No, because we had such access. There was never any. I don't know if you want me to get to the reaction or
Yes,
or what. A couple of we left this place in flames, and as I said, you could see smoke rising from the other hamlets around. I wrote the piece. A lot of that it was ad lib, because I didn't expect to find what I found, so I was ad-libbing my way through this, finished it, filed it, sent it to Saigon. I called Saigon. We had a military phone, so because the communications were terrible. The civil communications were almost non-existent.
Mm-hmm.
We had a military line, that wind-up phone. And I dictated a cable back to the Bureau to be sent, Saigon Bureau to be sent, saying what I'd seen. You know better than I what the reaction was. I wasn't in America for the reaction, but I know that the Pentagon was extremely upset, and there was an initial denial, and if not a denial, minimizing the operation in terms of numbers of houses and all of that. Of course, so often is the case when a bureaucracy denies something, it doesn't check everything out first. It didn't check out that Charlie Moore of the New York Times was in a helicopter, and his count of the devastation of this extended hamlet was much higher than mine, because he had a much broader view of it.
Right. Now, had you anticipated the tremendous impact, the outrage that this would cause?
Not really. Not really, because we lived in a kind of glorious isolation there. There was a sense that you were just sending your stuff out in the blue like that, and rarely getting any response to stories. I mean, you'd get cables back, great story or terrible story, but no, I mean, there wasn't any great particular.
But you knew that this. Excuse, let me interrupt.
I knew it was a hell of a story.
Right.
Oh no, absolutely. Don't get me wrong. I knew it was a hell of a story. Partly because the story itself wasn't done in complete isolation. We had heard stories about stuff like that going on. I've had stories like that from military guys who were unhappy with it, about what was going on. But I wasn't out there hunting one of those stories. I mean, I said we heard stories. I mean, they were just in the air, rumors too. I had no idea that I was going on that story. When I went checking out those Marine bases, there was no question that I was going on, that I was following up some rumor or something like that.